Hello, Jepoy Vlogs. Today, I'm going to talk about the American action thriller Passenger 57. Take care and be careful. Charles Raine is a well-known British terrorist who has planned numerous bombings, assassinations, and other atrocities. He even tried to kill the governor, but despite his history of criminal activity, he has never been apprehended. In fact, Charles is also an escape artist who deceives and uses his power to evade the authorities in the opening scene. He is spotted in an operating room. It turns out that Charles is about to have a procedure that will completely alter his appearance, according to several doctors who are around him. This is the 10th time he is going to do so. When the head specialist asks, assuming he wants any sedation to bear the aggravation, Charles declines. He wants to undergo the surgery while remaining completely conscious, claiming that he enjoys pain. Meanwhile, there are a few police officers outside the building. They have been told where Charles is, and they are here to storm the operating room and finally catch him. But before they start the mission, the chief police officer tells everyone that Charles is a dangerous assassin who can kill multiple men at once. Is a real troublemaker, and he knows how to get his way. They slowly make their way to the 13th floor, where the surgery is about to take place. You know, I'm going to take a walk after a while. Charles, sadly for them, is well prepared when the police enter the room. He avoids the hail of bullets and kills the chief doctor. After that, Charles Ben runs through the corridor, smashes a glass window, jumps out of the building, and even though he free falls from the 13th floor, he lands perfectly and doesn't get hurt. He can even run at full speed, as if jumping from buildings is his specialty. However, regardless of how quickly he runs, after 15 years of being elusive, the notorious Charles Raine is finally apprehended by the police, who have cars and eventually corner him. Okay, how could he leap out of that structure? However, they better make sense of that. The scene then, at that point, movements to a plane where a delightful airline steward Marta is keeping an eye on the travelers one by one. Everything has all the earmarks of being going flawlessly when out of nowhere an obscure-peering fellow takes out a firearm and kidnaps her. If she refuses, he says he will kill her. Marta casually kicks him in the leg when they don't respond, giving a nearby passenger time to take the gun from him. When it is finally revealed that the whole thing was just a practice session to teach the flight attendants self-defense, everyone starts to clap. Some way or another, I question the right game plan is to kick the person with the firearm in the leg on a plane. The obscure-looking person is John Shaper, Brighton fighter and resigned secret help specialist who is known for his extreme position on significant-level wrongdoings. Sooner or later, the senior supervisor of Atlantic Worldwide Carriers Slide Del Vecchio shows up and removes John. Maybe the two are old buddies. He is slyly asked to return to the business and serve the nation. Yet, John declines. He specifies that he no longer needs to put his life in danger for others regardless, while he offers him a task as the top of the counter-psychological oppression unit in Atlantic Global Carriers. When John hears that he only needs to work twice a month, he gives it some thought before finally accepting it. I figured that getting kicked in the balls by hot flight attendants was all that happened in my life, but I guess this will do. Is taken to his cell while an attorney awaits him. The latter reveals that the authorities intend to transport him to California and execute him in the chair, the only way to avoid this, as if Charles pleads sanity. Sadly, the well-known terrorist does not take the suggestion in good terms, and he hits the attorney against the table. In the following scene, claiming that I am not insane, we see a shirtless John contemplating and reminiscing about his past. The movie then takes us back to a few years ago, when John and his deceased wife were shopping in a convenience store. John, a trustworthy individual, tries to stop the thief from stealing money from the counter when a robber suddenly appears. In any case, the burglar keeps his significant other prisoner. Everybody in the store steps back. However, in spite of this, the looter shoots the unfortunate lady. John in the end kills him, yet when he gets back to beware of his better half. He was so traumatized by the incident that he quit his job as a special agent and isolated himself for months. In the present, she has already passed away. John prepares for his first day on the job. He must protect a large lockhead while remaining anonymous. John is assigned seat number 57 on the airline with nearly 200 passengers, which is where the name of the movie comes from. Charles and two FBI agents also board the plane, indicating that the flight is headed for California. Marta is one of the flight attendants, while Sabrina, a pretty young girl, is the other. In the meantime, A young child observes Charles and, in response, fires an imaginary bullet at him. The cold-blooded killer pretends to be dead, but when he shoots back at the boy, his handcuffs come out, which wakes up the passengers who are nearby. They start to wonder if the flight is safe, and Sabrina tells them there is nothing to worry about. After a while, she calls a staff member on the lower deck who looks suspicious and asks him to send over this special service. Sabrina withdraws the contents of the metal box, which turns out to be a gun, and she then proceeds toward the two unsuspecting FBI agents and shoots them in. John, who is annoyed by his chatty seatmate, gets up and heads to the restroom to have some alone time once he locks the door. The guy does as the guy says and puts a metal briefcase on the waiting tray at the same time. The head, much to the horror of everyone, following Charles and locks shackles. When Charles learned that the agents were escorting him in a commercial airline, he had all along planned everything out. 3 of his henchmen get out of their seats and threaten everyone to stay in their seats. Here, it is revealed that Charles had planned everything out. He quickly recruited certain individuals to capture it in the following scene. Charles heads to the cockpit and shoots one of the pilots dead to declare his predominance. Then, at that point, he reports over the radio that they will take a different path and that the plane is formally seized. John, who is still in the restroom, will not be harmed if the passengers maintain their composure and follow his instructions. He overhears everything and becomes terrified. He then manages to get into the plane's onboard phone and slyly explains the situation to his friend. He then skillfully subdues one of the hijackers, takes his gun, and uses him as a shield to confront Charles. Charles then grabs Marta, which sets up a fierce battle between the two. Charles shoots an innocent man to demonstrate his point after quickly letting go of the flight attendant. But it accidentally kills one of his henchmen. Taking advantage of the chaos, John and Marta run away from the scene, enter the elevator, and take it all the way down to the cargo hold. There, they come across the man who looks suspicious and ask him if he knows anything about the hijackers. The man acts shocked. After tying him up, Marta and John were forced to the Ionic section of the plane, where John proposes that they dump all the fuel and force. However, at the right time, he whips out a knife and tries to attack John. The two engage in an intense duel, and our protagonist manages to knock the bad guy out with an impressive kick. If only he were that good at doing his taxes. As a child, Marta strongly opposed the idea of an emergency landing because it could easily result in a crash. However, when John explains that it is their only option once the fuel is almost empty, she allows him to proceed. The two head toward the landing gear because it is the best place to jump out of the plane without suffering many injuries, which is fortunate. The arrangement works, and when Charles discovers that they are running nearly out of fuel, he asks the pilots to make an emergency landing at the closest airport. Meanwhile, superiors at Atlantic International Headquarters learn that the hijacked plane is about to land at a small Lake Lucille airstrip. Louisiana therefore swiftly boards at the customer and moves on to a different location. John and Marta want to jump out of the plane as soon as possible, so they're waiting for it to land so they can. However, the plane eventually comes to a stop. But just as the tour was about to end, John is forced from the plane while Marta is held hostage once more by one of the hijackers. 2 police officers arrive on the scene and immediately arrest John. Despite John's best efforts to claim he was the head of security on the plane, the fact that you didn't pay your taxes doesn't change that. Charles makes contact with the control tower while Buddy is being escorted away, and the chief sheriff Mr. Biggs responds. Charles makes it clear right away that the plane needs to be refueled within 10 minutes in exchange, and he promises to release 100 passengers if the sheriff refuses to accept the deal. Charles kills 5 passengers, make a statement, which frightens Mr. Biggs, and he finally gives the go-ahead to refuel the plane. After a while, John is brought to the control tower, and even Mr. Biggs believes that John is a bad guy. Yet again his questions are at last affirmed when the shrewdness Charles calls him in lies that John is one of his men who got away from in the wake of deceiving him. Hearing this, Mr. Biggs orders his officials to secure John in the storm cellar. However, the latter repels them with impressive skill, snags a police motorcycle and makes his way to the airport. In the meantime, Charles releases 100 passengers as promised after the plane is refueled. However, taking advantage of the commotion, he also sneaks out with a man who looks suspicious and another man. The three of them then head to a fair near the control tower. The FBI at long last shows up and asks Mr. Enormous to give a full report on the circumstance. When the sheriff specifies that they had beat up and gotten John Shaper, the head specialist flies off the handle. Lastly uncovers that John is one of them. Tax avoidance be cursed somewhere else at the festival fair. John, who remains steadfast, has secretly observed Charles and his manner. John climbs a Ferris wheel and one of the hijackers follows him there. The two engaged in a small tussle that ended with the man being thrown off the Ferris wheel, resulting in his immediate death. Unfortunately, his cover was blown when he caught them. One of the hijackers tried to shoot him, but misses. An innocent person took the bullet. The unsuspecting Charles is subdued by John, who jumps on him and eventually subdues him while the FBI and local officers take him away. Sly Delva Cho also arrives and congratulates his friend for successfully confronting the terrorist, but they were unaware that the problem is far from over. John, enraged, tries to negotiate with the officers after Charles makes the threat that his gang members on the plane will start killing passengers one by one if he is not released. The FBI and the other officials, however, decide to allow Charles back onto the plane because they have exhausted all other options. On the other hand, they have an idea that they will use snipers to topple a nearby building, and Charles and the other hijackers will be shot to death as soon as they appear in sight. Since his gang members are naive, why not just kill Charles from the start? If he dies, they'll just give up. In the following scene, John is instructed to lead the entire mission. Two FBI agents lead Charles to the plane, but the snipers start shooting at them as they approach. It just so happens, the dubious-looking person from prior has killed the first rifleman and is presently gunning down all the FBI specialists. Soon a shootout between the robbers and the specialists follows, which brings about a few passings, including that of the dubious-looking person. John is not going to give up easily, however, as the plane also begins to drift away. He stealthily climbs into Mr. Biggs's car and requests that he follow the plane. Although the stunt is extremely risky, Mr. Cutter can pull it off with ease. The plan is to grab hold of the retractable landing gear and enter the plane through that. Once inside, he kills one of the hijackers in the cargo hold and then sneaks onto Sabrina from by effortlessly clinging to the landing gear like it is his daily bread and butter. John heads to the cockpit and asks the passengers to change course and return to the Lake Lucille airstrip after this, and the final showdown begins despite John being a trained fighter. The notorious British hijacker Charles is now the only one left standing. Charles follows him stride for stride. During their fight, a stray bullet breaks one of the windows, causing the plane to lose air pressure. Marbz's main door is also destroyed. Whoever is standing right next to it is left hanging by a thread. The madness is finally over, and all the passengers celebrate by breaking out some cringe moves. John then contacts his superiors at the control tower and informs them that he has taken down Charles, making them rejoice in happiness in the final scene when the plane finally lands. Fortunately, John acted quickly and took Charles near the broken exit. The two of them exchanged some final blows. In the end, John prevailed by kicking the terrorist out of the plane with him now dead. In addition, all of the passengers are led to safety. John, fed up with the commotion and his taxes, walks out of the movie with his new girlfriend Marta and doesn't even bother to face the media. Instead, he slyly addresses the media and boastfully states that he was in charge of the entire operation. If you want to see more videos like this one, please enable notifications and like the channel. I appreciate your attention.